More now on inflation, how and why it's harming American families with Forbes media chairman and editor-in-chief Steve Forbes. His new book is Inflation: What It Is, Why It's Bad, How to Fix It. Steve, for 180 years, the value of the dollar had been tied to gold. But you say Richard Nixon ended that with his price controls and Nixon shock when he eliminated the Bretton Woods monetary policy. Now, some of us, I know, remember Nixon implementing price controls. And what effect did that and removing the U.S. from the gold standard have on our economy today? And how can we get back to it without causing too many disruptions in the economy?
Well, as you mentioned, for 180 years, we mostly had a gold standard. It worked. Having a stable money is essential. Stable value, and it's a critical reason why during that period of time the U.S. experienced the greatest growth, economic growth in human history because of that stable money. Britain had done it before when they stabilized their money to gold. All gold is like a measuring rod. It doesn't restrict the money supply. If you have a booming economy, the money supply increases. All gold guarantees is that the value of the dollar doesn't change. You know, we don't change the number of ounces in a pound or the number of minutes in an hour or the number of inches in a foot. The same should be true of money. Now, for a variety of reasons, bad economic thinking, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard after 180 years of success in the early 1970s. And since then, the average growth rate of the United States has fell by more than 1/3, from a little over 4% to about a little over 2.5%, 2.75%. That doesn't sound like very much, but over a 50-year period, what that has meant is that household incomes today are about $68,000. If we'd maintained the kind of growth we had for 180 years under the gold standard, that average household income would be $100,000 to $110,000. Imagine instead of having $60,000, you had $100,000 or $110,000, how much better life would be. That's the price over time when you have an unstable money unanchored to gold. Over time, it is devastating.
Now, there was also an energy crisis in the early to mid-'70s as the cost of oil quadrupled. Many politicians blame the Arab oil embargo. You say it was more of a currency crisis that happened after Nixon devalued the dollar. So how about this How about the current jump in oil and gasoline prices? Is this another money illusion? Are the high prices temporary or here to stay?
Well, it's partly it is a money illusion. Going back to the 70s, oil went from, during that terrible inflation, from $3 a barrel to almost $40 a barrel. Then in the early 2000s, when we started to undermine the dollar again, which led to the crisis in 2008 and that terrible housing bust, oil went from $25 to over $100 a barrel, then went back a little bit. Now it's starting to move up again. Part of it is because of restraints that we've unnecessarily put on our output of oil and natural gas. Really dumb thing to do, and we're paying a price at the pump for it. But also, it's the monetary illusion, and so that's what's so hideous about inflation. You think the dollar is stable, and you don't understand why it just doesn't buy as much as it used to. And governments always, and you hit on this point, governments always blame somebody else. In Roman times, they blamed Christians. Medieval times, they blame witches. You mentioned Richard Nixon blamed the Arabs. Today, the Biden administration blames greedy oil company executives, blames greedy meat companies and chicken companies. Everyone but themselves. They're the ones to blame, not we the people.
And there's a lot of uncertainty globally right now with the Ukraine war, a potential Iran nuclear deal, China possibly preparing to move on Taiwan. So how should people respond, Steve? What's the best investment strategy right now? Gold, commodities, real estate, stocks? Where should people put their money?
We discuss this in the book, and the thing to keep in mind is there is no simple remedy. Gold is not an investment. Gold is like an insurance policy for bad behavior by our governments and central bankers. So you should have some gold in your portfolio. In terms of real estate, you got to do your homework. There's certain parts of the country, for example, like New York or San Francisco, there's been overbuilding of commercial real estate, so you want to stay away from that. And but forest lands could be that way. We list some ETFs that you might consider. And then you also, and this is what makes it so difficult, when it looks like the government is finally going to do something about inflation, like we did in the early 1980s, suddenly those investments that did well when the dollar was losing value suddenly become very bad investments. I mentioned the collapse in the price of oil. You saw it in farmland and other in commodities. And for younger people, I'd give them this advice. For their retirement funds, and you should have, no matter what your age is, a 401k, an IRA, whatever it is you can do, keep putting most of the money into the stock market. Not all of it. You should have a cash reserve. You should have some gold, but keep most of it in the stock market, because America, and I know this sounds Pollyannish, but America always comes back. So if you're young, you can ride through the storm, just as people did in the 70s, just as people did in other periods. Ride it through, and you're going to do just fine.
And I can't let you go without asking you, flat tax, you still believe in that?
I believe it in more than ever, as we now have literally millions of words in the corrupt federal income tax code that nobody understands. The IRS is hopeless today. They barely answer the phone if you call with a question 20% of the time, and most of the time they give you the wrong answer because it's so complicated. The only way to cure that, Gary, is just throw the whole thing out. I used to say bury the code, but the EPA probably wouldn't allow that since it's so toxic. So just throw it out and just start all over again, single rate. Under a flat tax, for example, a family of four, their first $52,800 of salary would be free of federal income tax. That's what happens when you get rid of all the junk in the code, but they still keep junking up. Go to a simple flat tax. Go to doing what we did for 180 years. Fix the dollar to gold, and by golly, you'd see this country boom like it's never done before.
It's so simple. What a concept. Okay. Forbes Media CEO, Editor-in-Chief Steve Forbes. The new book is Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. Thank you, Steve. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Good to see you again.
Good to be with you. Thank you.